You know what? That is a really old ox shoe. I can tell by the condition of it. It's been down there a while.
Gary Drayton pulled an ox shoe out of a hidden road buried beneath the Oak Island swamp, and it was sitting inside a stone path that may predate every colonial map of the island. The road runs through the western swamp, paved in sand and cobblestone, lined with octagonal wooden stakes spaced exactly 21 feet apart. Radiocarbon dating on leather found nearby came back to the 1100s. A road with iron-shod ox traffic isn't a natural formation, it's infrastructure. And infrastructure means someone was on this island long enough and hauling enough weight to build a permanent route toward the money pit. Iron in the road.
Well, we're all assembled here again for probably the most important job we can do this year, which is to try and get these caissons in the right spot.
Gary Drayton was sweeping his metal detector over a sand and cobblestone feature in the western swamp when the detector picked up an iron signal buried within the road structure. The team dug roughly a foot down and pulled out an old ox shoe. Gary turned it over in his hands and noted that it looked rough and less finished than modern examples. A detail that suggested age, not neglect. The metal was corroded. The shape was cruder than what you'd see on a working farm in the 1800s. Then he said something that shifted the entire conversation from what the road is to what it was used for. Ox shoes indicate travel and the possible hauling of materials toward the money pit. He recommended sending the shoe to blacksmith Carmen Lager for a formal age evaluation. But even before a dating result comes back, the ox shoe answered a question the stone road alone never could. Stone features can form naturally. Glacial deposits sort cobble into lines. Tidal action pushes rocks into rows along old shorelines. A geologist can look at a cobble formation and reasonably argue it's natural. But an ox shoe inside that formation isn't geology. It's evidence of use, of traffic, of weight, of labor. Something heavy was being moved along this path, pulled by an animal strong enough to need iron on its hooves, on a route running from the western swamp toward the heart of the island. Billy Gerhardt traced the road with heavy equipment to the edge of the team's permitted dig area, and the feature didn't stop. It appeared to continue beyond the boundary, heading toward Center Road, the path laid out by Surveyor General Charles Morris in 1762 as part of the first colonial survey of the island. Craig Tester stood in the trench, looked at the road structure, and proposed something that hung in the air. The sand road might predate the 1762 survey entirely. If he's right, the road was built before the British colonial administration even mapped the island. Peter Fornetti went further, theorizing that the road once connected Lot 5 to the money pit through the swamp. A logistics route between two of the most active investigation zones on the island. Stakes that shouldn't be there.
Decided stake? 5. You can see it's been bounced. It's been cut with an axe. You can see those bounces on that side there.
Well, one thing's for sure, that's exactly where it was.
Yeah.
2 weeks before the ox shoe changed the conversation, the team made a finding in the southwestern swamp that's harder to explain away than the road itself. The team uncovered cut wooden stakes embedded in the swamp floor. Not round branches, not broken timber, not driftwood jammed into the muck by storm surge. 5-sided and 8-sided stakes, manufactured with deliberate geometry, found in pairs, spaced exactly 21 feet apart in a consistent northwest alignment toward the center of the swamp. The precision was startling. When the team predicted where a third stake should appear, based on nothing but the 21-foot interval, they dug at the calculated position and found it exactly where the pattern said it would be. That moment matters, because it eliminates chance. 1 stake is debris. 2 stakes at a consistent interval are a coincidence worth investigating. A third stake appearing at a predicted location based on the interval is a pattern. And a pattern of manufactured octagonal stakes at precisely measured distances isn't construction debris or old fencing. It's surveying. These weren't fence posts or dock pilings or the remnants of a fishing stage. They were markers placed by someone who measured the ground deliberately before they built on it. Professor Adriano Gaspani, an archaeoastronomer who has studied alignments at medieval European sites, analyzed the orientation of the stakes and concluded that the octagonal stakes share stellar alignments with Nolan's cross, the arrangement of large boulders mapped by Fred Nolan decades ago, consistent with a 13th century construction date. Carbon-14 testing of leather recovered from the same area returned a primary date range of 1148 to 1216 AD. Those aren't money pit era dates. They aren't colonial era dates, they're medieval, and they predate every documented European settlement in Nova Scotia except the Norse at Lonceau Meadows, over 1,000 kilometers to the north. Cobble beach or construction site.
You know, to me, it looks like it ties up to Center Road.
Right.
Yeah. The Sand Road is a continuation of Center Road.
The skeptical counter-argument to the swamp road is straightforward, and it deserves a serious hearing. The road follows the edge of the swamp, which was once a shoreline. Cobble beaches are common throughout the Mahone Bay area. Tidal action, storm surge, and glacial deposits can all produce linear stone formations that look, to an untrained eye or even a trained one, remarkably like a paved surface. If a natural cobble beach were buried under centuries of peat accumulation and then exposed in a straight excavation trench, it could look exactly like a road. Not because someone built it, but because nature sorted it. Archaeothoughts, a skeptical archaeology blog that has covered Oak Island findings in detail for years, has proposed that the paved area could be a 17th century European fish curing platform, what the French called a galette. These were flat stone surfaces built near shorelines where cod was dried and salted, common throughout Nova Scotia's colonial fishing industry. They've also raised the possibility of indigenous stone construction, which would reframe the feature entirely. And they've flagged a point that matters for credibility. Dr. Ian Spooner's swamp findings, while presented compellingly on the show, haven't been published in a peer-reviewed journal. Television is not a journal. A statement made on camera, however dramatic, doesn't carry the same evidentiary weight as a finding that has survived the scrutiny of independent peer review. On Reddit, the road debate splits cleanly and loudly. One commenter summarized the pro-construction case in terms that left no room for nuance. It has been determined to be a stone road by a legitimate doctorate-level archaeologist. Others push back just as firmly, arguing that reality television has every financial incentive to present ambiguous natural formations as dramatic discoveries, and that viewers should reserve judgment until published analysis is available. The honest position lives somewhere between those poles, and it's worth stating plainly. The Cobble Beach explanation accounts for the stones. What it struggles to account for is the full evidence package. Octagonal cut stakes at measured 21-foot intervals, an ox shoe embedded within the road, organic material dated to the 1500s, a construction style described on the show as resembling Portuguese methods, and leather from the same area dated to the 1100s. Each piece alone can be explained away. Together, they resist simple explanation, and that resistance is what makes the road worth investigating rather than dismissing. What Fred Nolan knew. Fred Nolan owned a significant portion of Oak Island for decades, and spent most of his adult life insisting on something the rest of the treasure hunting world dismissed, that the triangular swamp wasn't natural. Nolan believed the swamp was an artificial creation, deliberately constructed to conceal earlier work on the island. He mapped large boulders across the property that formed a cross pattern, which came to be known as Nolan's Cross. And he argued the swamp itself was evidence of engineering on a scale that predated the Money Pit legend by centuries. For most of his life, he was treated as a crank. He feuded with Dan Blankenship. He blocked access to his lots. He insisted the rest of the island's treasure hunters were digging in the wrong place. He died in 2016 without seeing his theory tested at scale. And for years after his death, the swamp remained secondary to the Money Pit, a feature the team acknowledged but didn't prioritize. The shafts, the tunnels, the voids at depth. Those were the headlines. The swamp was the place Billy Gerhardt moved dirt around, while the real work happened elsewhere. Season 13 changed that. Rick Lagina stood in the swamp, on ground Nolan had insisted was artificial for decades, and explicitly connected the team's findings to Nolan's long-standing belief. The blue clay beneath the surface, the mortar-like binding material holding stones together, the survey stakes at measured intervals, the road extending toward the Money Pit. All of it pointed toward deliberate construction, not the natural accumulation of wetland sediment over centuries. What makes the Nolan connection more than a sentimental callback is the data Dr. Ian Spooner has assembled over more than 20 years of studying Oak Island's wetlands. Spooner is a geoscientist at Acadia University, and his core samples from the triangular swamp tell a story in layers, literally. The swamp formed around 1220 AD as a terrestrial environment. Before it became waterlogged, the area supported dry vegetation and was walkable ground. Then came a significant saltwater intrusion in the late 1300s to early 1400s. A dramatic environmental shift that Spooner attributed to likely human manipulation of the coastline, though he acknowledged that a catastrophic storm couldn't be completely ruled out. The floor of the Eye of the Swamp, the central depression where the team has focused its excavation, was disturbed by humans between 1674 and 1700. Wood recovered beneath the stone pavement in the swamp returned a radiocarbon date in the 1200s. Layer by layer, Spooner's cores describe a location that was dry land, then engineered, then flooded, then buried under centuries of peat, exactly the sequence Fred Nolan proposed before any of this data existed. Not approximately the sequence, exactly it. Nolan said the swamp was built to hide something. Spooner's data says the swamp was built over something. The difference in interpretation is smaller than the agreement on the central fact. This wetland is not natural. Spooner declared he was 95% certain that human activity had occurred on the island centuries ago, and he described the swamp in 3 words that have echoed through every season since: built, constructed, engineered for a purpose. A road changes the question. Every treasure hunter who's come to Oak Island since 1795 has asked the same question: what is buried here? The swamp road asks a different one entirely. What was happening here? There's a fundamental difference between a deposit and an operation. A single buried vault suggests a one-time event. Arrive, dig a hole, deposit something valuable, seal it, leave. You don't need a road for that. You need a shovel and a boat. A road suggests something else entirely: repetition. The same route traveled over and over, carrying loads too heavy or too numerous for an unmarked path through rough terrain. Roads are expensive. They take time to build. Nobody paves a path they're only going to use once. An ox shoe inside the road means animal-powered hauling, not foot traffic. That's not a person walking with a sack over their shoulder. That's organized transport. Teams, animals, weight. Survey stakes at 21-foot intervals means someone measured the ground before they built on it, which means planning preceded construction. And the dating places all of it in the same operational window as every other medieval artifact on the island. Organic material in the road dated to the 1500s. Leather from the swamp area dated to the 1100s. A construction style compared on the show to Portuguese methods. The lead cross, the garnet brooch, the Azorian stone shots, Spooner's saltwater intrusion in the late 1300s. These aren't scattered anomalies anymore. They're starting to describe a single operation, and the swamp road may be the infrastructure that connected it. The swamp isn't an isolated curiosity sitting at the edge of the investigation. It's beginning to look like the logistical spine of whatever happened on this island. The route between the work sites and the water, built by people organized enough to survey the path with octagonal markers and resourced enough to pave it with cobblestone. If the road predates the 1762 Morris survey as Craig Tester proposed, then it's older than every documented English-era activity on Oak Island. And if it connects Lot 5 to the Money Pit, as Peter Fornetti theorized, then the island's 2 most active investigation sites may have been linked by deliberate infrastructure all along, hidden under 600 years of swamp. The triangular swamp held its secret for centuries. Waterlogged, dismissed, and walked past by every treasure hunter chasing the Money Pit. But what Season 13 has uncovered beneath the peat isn't dead ground. It's a road, marked with surveyors' stakes, embedded with evidence of animal hauling, and dated to a window that predates every colonial map of the island. The question it raises isn't what was buried at the end of the road, it's how far the road goes, and whether the swamp itself was built to hide the fact that it was ever there. For a closer look at the discovery that has fans debating whether the treasure has already been confirmed, and what the team pulled out of the ground that started the argument, check out this video now.